Now, international condemnation has been directed at Uganda for a controversial bill passed by lawmakers that criminalizes identifying as LGBTQ+ and imposes harsh penalties for same-sex relations. The bill, known as the Anti-Homosexuality Bill of 2023, would impose a life sentence for convicted homosexuals and a death penalty for cases considered as aggravated homosexuality, which includes a broad range of sexual acts. Supporters of the bill argue that it is necessary to protect traditional values and the nation's moral fabric. Some have also claimed that homosexuality is not a natural or normal part of human behavior and that it poses a threat to public health and safety. Now, some supporters have even gone as far as to suggest that homosexuality is a Western import that is being imposed on African cultures. Meanwhile, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, has called the bill draconian and a violation of Uganda's constitution, whilst U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has condemned the legislation as an attack on fundamental human rights. The bill must now go to Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni for approval, although international pressure is mounting for him to reject the bill. Let's have a conversation on the back of this. Joining me now is Andrew Mwenda. He's a social critic. He's joined us from Kampala. Thank you so much for your time here, Andrew.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Now, you have called this bill, and first of all, let me tell our audiences that we may have the need for some parental guidance on this topic. But Andrew, you have called this bill stupid and morality policing. Talk to us a bit more about this.
Well, it is stupid in the sense that I wonder how, if a government legislated how people should conduct themselves in the privacy of their bedrooms, I wonder how the government would enforce something like that. Are they going to appoint a morality police to inspect every person sleeping in their bedroom to see how they are having sex? So that is how stupid it is. But it is also a disaster in the sense that this is the first time, I think, in world history that a law is passed that criminalizes homosexuality as an identity as opposed to an act. Most laws in all countries criminalize homosexual acts. But this law in Uganda criminalizes a person for being a homosexual. So if you identify yourself as a homosexual, you have committed a crime and you go to jail for 20 years. If you are a landlord and a homosexual rents your house, you go to jail for 10 years. If you are an owner of a hotel and a homosexual books a room in your hotel, you are supposed to go to jail. If you are DSTV and you air the Premier League, and in the Premier League, there are players in the Premier League who wear these armbands to support gay rights, orange armbands, you have committed a crime of promoting gay rights, and therefore your TV will be shut down. I don't know how DSTV will be able to work in Uganda because they can no longer, under this law, they will no longer be able to transmit the Premier League. It also says, except for a lawyer, if a patient goes to a doctor, let's say psychotherapist, and says, I'm a homosexual, I need psychotherapy, the psychotherapist or the doctor for that matter is required by this law to report to the police. I mean, it is so absurd and draconian that it defies all imagination.
Very well. I just want us to also discuss a few of the reasons, really, that they have given for this. One of them being they do not wish to have grooming of young children in Zimbabwe, in Uganda, I beg your pardon. My mind is all over in Zimbabwe. But that is one of the reasons. They have taken action in the past against NGOs that they thought were grooming children. They have taken action against schools that they thought that were grooming children. They have also given reason of it is not African enough. What are your thoughts about that?
First of all, in regard to recruitment and grooming, that is a figment of the imagination. Where is it happening? They cannot even produce evidence of one single human person who has gone to schools to recruit. You see, homosexuality is not a cult or a religion like Christianity that you need to recruit people to join it. So I think that when people are filled with prejudice, they are more likely to clutch on every single straw like a drowning man in order to find a justification for their prejudices. So one, there is no recruitment. I wish they could produce evidence of anybody who has been recruited. It is true that there may be adult males who go to schools and molest young boys. We already have a law of defilement in Uganda that deals with that. Any adult who sleeps with a minor would be punishable by life in prison. So we don't need a law specifically targeting a particular identity called homosexuals for that. We already have a law that criminalizes adult to underage sex. So that is one. There is aggravated homosexuality which involves rape. In Uganda, we already have a law against rape. If you have non-consensual sex with somebody, it is already provided for in our penal code under the act dealing with rape. So I don't find any new law that they have passed that is not already taken care of by the existing penal code. This law is very specific. It targets an identity group called the LGBTIQ, all those letters. It targets that specific community, criminalizes their identity, criminalizes their actions, but also criminalizes all associations with them. If you are a father in Uganda right now and your son or daughter is gay or lesbian, you cannot keep them in your house. You are supposed to report them to the police and they get arrested.
I see.
I mean, how terrible can that be? Finally, they say it is an African. I don't know whether the members of parliament in Uganda have done any anthropological, sociological, and historical studies in sexuality in pre-colonial Africa. Homosexuality was a widespread practice in many communities within Africa, including in Uganda. So to say it is an African would be wrong. You can say it's a Christian, but Christianity is not an African religion. Christianity and Islam were imposed on our societies through colonial conquest and actions of Arabs. So in fact, it is Christianity that is alien to Uganda, not homosexuality.
I see. How do you think this will impact people who identify as homosexual or transgender in Uganda?
Of course, now, remember that people who are homosexual and transgender have been facing a problem at a social level, at the level of the family, the level of the church, the level of the school, the level of the village where they come from, or the neighborhood. Uganda is a predominantly homophobic society. So to identify oneself as a homosexual attracts social sanctions in form of ostracization. Kids are cast out of their families by their parents, by their relatives. They are bullied in school, they are attacked in the church, they are preached against in the mosque. So the homosexual community have been a subject of ferocious and vicious attacks at all levels. What these people have done is to add the weight of the state and its repressive instruments of coercion, like the police, the army, and the prisons, into play. I think that homosexuals have enough sanctions against them that are rooted in our society at the level of modern tradition, I should say, at the level of the church and the mosque, at the level of popular perceptions, that you don't even need a law. The sanctions by society are so vicious, they're so psychologically damaging to homosexuals that you don't even need a law to throw them in jail, to deny them housing, to deny them medical care, to deny them access to education. You don't have to.
I see. Could this have any impact on progress made with, conditions like HIV and AIDS once people go back into the closet?
Without a doubt, without a doubt. Just imagine if a homosexual has a medical problem, which requires them to declare to their doctor how they got that medical problem. If they declare to the doctor that it came as a result of a homosexual act, the doctor is required by law to report to the police and this person gets arrested. So the law adds insult to injury because it gets an already ostracized group and now even uses the weight of the state to deny them accommodation, to deny them medical care, to deny them housing, to deny them access to psychotherapy. In fact, they cannot even get access to the church because if you go to the born-again churches in Uganda, they are by and large dominated by homosexuals. Why? Many Ugandans, when they realize they are gay, they think that they have been cast by the devil. So their first reaction is to run to the church to seek salvation. So the church is their refuge. But now they are saying, if you go and say in church that you're homosexual, the priest you tell must immediately report to the police and you get arrested. And if you confess and he doesn't, then to the priest, then you have committed, the priest himself has committed a crime, they get arrested for 5 or 10 years.
I see. Does this bill make any provisions for people who will attack persons who identify as homosexual or transgender, like we've seen in the past?
I don't think the homosexuals therefore have any protection. If a mob attacked them, I don't know what the law does not provide anything. Because the law has criminalized them. You're a criminal by identity. It is like passing a law saying you are a criminal because you are Yoruba. You are a criminal because you are Igbo. You are a criminal because you are Hausa Fulani. So if you identify yourself as Hausa Fulani, it does not matter whether you practice Hausa Fulani culture or not. Just by you being so, you have committed a crime and you are supposed to go to jail for 20 years.
I see.
So if anyone attacks you, I don't know what protections you have.
I see. What truth do you think there is to reports that suggest that this may not be a move to benefit the country, but rather it's bowing to pressure from conservative American evangelicals who have descended on the continent and making sure that countries on the continent abhor homosexuality?
Well, first of all, I think that the primary driver of this bill is widespread homophobia within Ugandan society. I just want to note that. However, I admit that this homophobia within Uganda also finds support in conservative, neoconservative sectors of American and Russian society. And those have also come with their own evangelical message and money and added fuel to an already burning inferno. But we should not take away the agency of Ugandans. I, who know this country very well, Ugandans are largely a homophobic lot, and the external factors are only secondary and contributory. They are not primary, and they are not the foundation against which this law was made.
I see. What can be done at this point? And maybe I should start by asking, in 2013, a similar law was passed, but it fell through the cracks when it went to court. Do you think this will go to the end? Would it be really assented by President Museveni?
President Museveni is a politician, and his job depends on appeasing public opinion. Public opinion in Uganda is heavily in favor of this law. For example, 73% of members of parliament showed up, and all of them, 399 out of 400, voted for the law. The 27% who did not show up were afraid of their Western benefactors seeing them voting for this law, at the same time afraid of their local constituencies seeing them vote against the law, so they hid. And right now their constituents are searching for them, saying, why didn't you show up? So knowing President Museveni, I imagine that as any politician, he is most likely going to sign this law in order to demonstrate that he is in sync with the popular opinion of the Ugandan people. That leaves it to the courts. I personally and my other liberal intellectual colleagues are going to take this law to court if he signs it. And I have some level of confidence that the courts of Uganda will not sustain it. They will throw it out because it has so many draconian provisions that violate rules to privacy, rules to rights to privacy with the doctor-patient confidentiality and things like that. I don't even think the courts of Uganda would agree that because you are homosexual, you should not be entitled to housing. Because as I told you, one of the provision actually prohibits anybody providing housing to a homosexual. It means if you are a parent, you cannot house your children if they are. If you are a landlord, you cannot rent out your house to homosexuals. If you are a hotel, you cannot provide them accommodation. So where are they supposed to live? In trees?
Well, that's a question for Uganda to answer. Speaking of which, we know that there are citizens who support this, there are those who are against this. What can citizens who are not for this, particularly the LGBTQ plus community, do to ensure that they are safe and secure in Uganda and this law does not materialize?
I think right now, I am very suspicious that the president is going to sign it. So the only recourse is the courts of law. I hope that the courts of law can find it in their wisdom to throw out this law, because the law is not just stupid, it is also barbaric. It is as if it's drawn from the 15th century.
Should this pass, could it incur some international sanctions for Uganda?
First of all, I should tell you, I really don't believe that foreigners should get involved. Why? I saw Secretary of State Antony Blinken of the United States. I saw the Prime Minister of Canada, the Prime Minister of the UK. They have issued these statements. I don't think that's right, because what they do is the homophobes of Uganda argue that homosexuality is a Western cultural practice that the Western powers are trying to impose on Uganda. Mm-hmm. What more evidence do the homophobes need than an American president, a British prime minister, a French president, a German chancellor saying we are going to impose sanctions because you are doing like this and this? Then they're saying, we are being forced. So that is going to make them even dig in further. I think the more the Western world keeps a distance and allows local and domestic forces or agency to work, the better. So my own advice, I've been talking to every single person at the State Department, at Whitehall in Britain, to every foreign embassy in Uganda. I say, look, keep away. We don't need your assistance. You can assist quietly through moral expression of moral solidarity, but when you go out in the public, mm-hmm. you weaken the case for gay rights in Uganda, because now it appears as your agenda rather than a domestic demand.
At the same time, the bodies on the continent, at last check, haven't spoken to this matter. Does it make you wonder why other African countries haven't spoken, organizations, regional blocs, continental blocs haven't spoken about this?
Since you are an African, I'm sure you know this. Across most of our continent, we have not gone through a process of cultural, religious, and social change to make homosexuality an acceptable lifestyle within our communities. So it follows that the governments of Africa actually are reflecting the biases, prejudices of their citizens. So African institutions, whether it's the South African Community, ECOWAS, the African Union, have not done anything against this, because their views are a reflection of the views of the society. I also tell my friends in the Western world that they need to give Uganda time to go through the same cultural evolution they went through. Do not forget, by the way, that 70 years ago, actually even 40 years ago, homosexuality was a crime in all of the Western world. Laws decriminalizing homosexuality started in the 1970s and 80s. Legalizing of it started in the 1990s and 2000s. So I always tell my friends in the West that they should see our present in their past, and understand that it's very possible that we also will culturally and traditionally evolve towards where they are. So the best thing they can do for us is to keep out of our business and let us handle these matters as ourselves. Just like they were able to go through that process of change and achieve the change they have so far realized, we will also go through that change. And their current support, right now, open support and sanctions and things like that, they do not solve the problem. They make a bad situation worse.
I see. We'll leave it here for now, Andrew, and we'll look forward to how it goes with President Museveni, whether or not he assents to this or otherwise. I don't know.
I am willing to bet $100 that he will sign it.
And then you will take action. So we'll speak to you then. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you so much for hosting me.
Andrew Mwenda is a social critic. He joined us from Kampala, Uganda. We've been discussing a very touchy topic, very important topic as well. The recent anti-homosexuality and transgender law passed in Uganda. Many have described this as draconian, but that's our show for today. Thank you so much for your company. I hope to see you here same time tomorrow. My name is Kemini Amana. Bye-bye.